"The wedding is family only," my sister Natalie said with that practiced smile of hers. "You understand?" What I discovered when I booked my own venue that same weekend changed everything I thought I knew about my family, cost me relationships I'd cherished for decades, and revealed a truth so devastating that I had to rebuild my entire life from scratch. I thought I was just being excluded from a wedding. I had no idea I was about to uncover a conspiracy that had been brewing for years. My name is Cassandra Vale, and I'm 34 years old. For most of my life, I believed I was the middle child in a loving family from Millbrook Heights, a quiet suburb outside of Portland. I had an older sister, Natalie, who was 37, and a younger brother, Tyler, who was 29. We lived in one of those picture-perfect neighborhoods where everyone knew each other's business but pretended they didn't, where the biggest scandal was usually someone forgetting to bring their trash cans in on time. Our parents, Robert and Eleanor Vale, had raised us in a sprawling colonial house on Maple Ridge Drive. Dad worked in commercial real estate. Mom was a part-time accountant who volunteered at the local animal shelter. From the outside, we looked like the American dream personified. Holiday cards with matching sweaters, family vacations to Lake Tahoe every summer, birthday parties in our backyard that the whole neighborhood attended. But families, as I've learned, are like icebergs. What you see on the surface is maybe 10% of what's really there. The trouble started 3 months before Natalie's wedding, though I didn't recognize it as trouble at the time. It began with small things, the kind of shifts you notice but dismiss because acknowledging them would mean admitting something fundamental is wrong. Natalie had gotten engaged to her boyfriend of 4 years, a software engineer named David Hartwell. David was nice enough, quiet, steady, the kind of man who always remembered to ask about your day and actually listened to the answer. He worked for a tech company downtown, made good money, and seemed genuinely devoted to my sister. When they announced their engagement at Christmas dinner, we all cheered and toasted with Dad's expensive wine that he only brought out for special occasions. Finally, Mom had said, dabbing at her eyes with her napkin, I was starting to worry. "You'd never settled down, sweetheart," Natalie had laughed, that bright, musical laugh that had always made everyone in the room smile. Well, when you know, right? I remember feeling genuinely happy for her. Natalie deserved this. She'd always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, but she'd also had her share of heartbreak, bad relationships, career setbacks. That period in her late 20s when she'd moved back home for 8 months after a particularly brutal breakup, seeing her glowing with happiness, planning a future with someone who clearly adored her, felt like watching the universe finally give her what she'd always deserved. The engagement party was lovely. They held it at the country club where our parents had been members since before we were born. 200 guests, perfect spring weather. Servers circulating with champagne and those little appetizers that cost more per bite than most people spend on lunch. I wore a navy blue dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion and spent the evening making conversation with relatives I saw twice a year, catching up with family friends who remembered when I was just knee-high to a grasshopper. Everything seemed normal. More than normal, it seemed perfect. The first sign that something was off came in January, about 6 weeks after the engagement party. I was having lunch with Natalie at our usual spot, a little cafe called the Garden Room, in downtown Millbrook Heights. We'd been meeting there every other Wednesday for years, a tradition that started when I moved back to town after college and got my job at the marketing firm on 3rd Street. We were discussing wedding plans, the dress she'd found, the flowers. She was considering whether they should have a band or a DJ, normal sister conversation. Then she mentioned the guest list. "We're trying to keep it small," she said, picking at her Caesar salad. "Intimate, David's family is huge. And if we invite everyone, we'll be looking at 400 people easily." "That makes sense," I said. "How small are we talking?" "Around 150. Maybe 175 if we absolutely have to include the second cousins." I nodded, doing quick math in my head. "That's still pretty big for intimate, but I get it. Wedding costs add up fast." "Exactly. And the venue we want has a capacity limit anyway." She paused, twirling her fork in the lettuce. Actually, that's something I wanted to talk to you about. Something in her tone made me look up from my own salad. Oh, well, David and I have been talking, and we've decided to make it family only. I blinked. Family only, you know, just immediate family, and maybe a few very close friends. Parents, siblings, grandparents, that sort of thing, right? I said slowly. Immediate family. The thing is, she continued, and here's where that practiced smile made its first appearance. David's side is going to be pretty much just family too, so we're trying to balance things out. Make it fair. I was still processing. So when you say immediate family, parents, siblings, grandparents, Tyler and his girlfriend, obviously, David's parents and his brother. A few cousins who are more like siblings, you know how it is. I set down my fork. Natalie, I am your sibling. Of course you are. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. That's not what I meant. I meant, well, the thing is, we're really trying to keep costs down. And David's family has some complicated dynamics. Politics, you know, old family stuff. So we thought it would be easier if we just kept it super small and super simple. But I'm immediate family, I repeated, feeling stupid for having to say it. You are, absolutely. But the venue we chose is tiny. Like, 75 people maximum, and that's pushing it. And when you factor in David's family and the people we absolutely can't not invite. She trailed off, shrugging helplessly. So, I'm not invited to your wedding. It's not that you're not invited. It's that we can't invite everyone we want to. You understand, right? I stared at her. In 34 years of life, through all the usual family dramas and sibling rivalries and holiday tensions, it had never occurred to me that I might not be invited to my sister's wedding. Not because of a fight or a falling out, but because I didn't make the cut. Cassie, she prompted when I didn't respond. I understand, I heard myself say, though I didn't, not really. I knew you would. Her relief was palpable. You're always so reasonable about these things. And hey, we'll do something special, just us, to celebrate. Maybe a girls' weekend after the honeymoon? I nodded and smiled and finished my salad and let her talk about centerpieces and whether to have an open bar or just wine and beer. But something had shifted, some fundamental assumption about my place in the family structure. I drove home that afternoon feeling disoriented, like I'd been walking down a familiar street and suddenly realized all the house numbers were wrong. That night, I called my younger brother Tyler. He was living in Seattle, working as a graphic designer for a small firm that specialized in eco-friendly packaging. We talked maybe once a month, the kind of regular but not particularly deep contact that happens between siblings who love each other but don't have much in common beyond shared DNA. Hey, Cass. He said when he picked up. I could hear music. In the background, something electronic and atmospheric. What's up? Did you know about Natalie's wedding being family only? A pause. What do you mean? She told me today that they're keeping the guest list really small. Just immediate family. Right, yeah. She mentioned that, and I'm not invited. Another pause, longer this time. Wait, what? Apparently the venue is too small to include everyone they want. So they're just doing immediate family and very close friends. But your immediate family. That's what I said. That's weird. I mean, I'm invited. David's brother is invited. How are you not immediate family? I have no idea. Tyler was quiet for a moment. Did you guys have a fight or something? Something I don't know about. No, nothing. We've been fine. We had lunch every other Wednesday. She asked me to go dress shopping with her last month. That's really strange. Cass, are you sure you understood her right? Pretty sure. She said the venue only holds 75 people and they have to balance David's family with ours and there just isn't room. 75 people, Tyler's voice went up. For a wedding, that's not small, that's tiny. Where are they having it? Someone's living room, she didn't say. Just that it was small and they had to make difficult choices. This is weird, Tyler said again. Really weird. Did you ask Mom and Dad about it? Not yet. I thought I'd talk to you first. I think you should ask them, because either something happened that I don't know about, or Natalie is losing her mind. I promised I would and hung up feeling both better and worse. Better because Tyler's confusion validated my own. Worse because his confusion meant this really was as strange as it seemed. I waited until the weekend to bring it up with my parents. I drove over to their house on Saturday afternoon, telling myself I was just stopping by for a casual visit. But as soon as I walked into the kitchen where Mom was preparing dinner, I could feel the tension in the air like humidity before a storm. "Oh, Cassandra," Mom said without looking up from the chicken she was seasoning. "I was wondering when you'd come by." "Hi, Mom." "Where's Dad?" "In his office. He'll be down for dinner." She finally looked at me, and there was something in her expression I couldn't quite read. "How are you, sweetheart?" "I'm fine. Actually, I wanted to ask you about Natalie's wedding." Mom's hands stilled on the chicken. "Oh, she mentioned that they're keeping it family only. Very small." "Yes, that's what she told us. And I'm not invited." Mom resumed her seasoning, focusing intently on the task. "Well, venue limitations. You know, these young people want these fancy places that cost a fortune and can't accommodate a proper guest list." "Mom, I'm immediate family." "Of course you are. So why am I not invited to my sister's wedding?" She set down the spice shaker and turned to face me fully. "Cassandra, I think you're overreacting." Natalie explained the situation. "The venue is very small, they have budget constraints, and they're trying to keep things simple. But Tyler's invited." "Tyler is her brother. I'm her sister." "Yes." But Mom paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "Tyler and Natalie have always been closer, you know that." I felt like she'd slapped me. "What does that have to do with anything?" "I just mean that when you have to make difficult choices, you naturally gravitate toward the people you're closest to. So Natalie is closer to Tyler than she is to me." "I didn't say that. You just said Tyler and Natalie have always been closer." "Cassandra, you're twisting my words." "Am I?" Dad appeared in the doorway at that moment, probably drawn by the tension in our voices. "What's going on in here?" "Cassandra is upset about the wedding," Mom said, as if I were a child having a tantrum over not getting ice cream. "What about the wedding?" Dad asked, though something in his tone suggested he already knew. "I'm not invited," I said simply. Dad and Mom exchanged a look. One of those married couple looks that carries an entire conversation in the space of a few seconds. "Sweetheart," Dad said, "I'm sure Natalie explained about the venue size." She did. What she didn't explain is why her sister doesn't qualify as immediate family. Now, you know that's not how she meant it. How did she mean it? Another look between my parents. "Cassandra," Mom said, "you're being dramatic. This isn't about you." "Isn't it? My sister is getting married and I'm not invited, but somehow it's not about me, it's about practical limitations." Dad said, "Budget, venue size, guest list management. You're old enough to understand that weddings involve compromise." "I'm 34 years old. I understand compromise. What I don't understand is being excluded from one of the most important days in my sister's life because there isn't enough room, while Tyler, who lives 3,000 miles away and talks to her maybe 6 times a year, makes the cut." "Tyler is her baby brother," Mom said. "That's different." "Different how?" "You know how." But I didn't know how. I didn't know anything, apparently. The conversation devolved from there. My parents became increasingly defensive, I became increasingly frustrated, and nobody got anywhere near an explanation that made sense. I left their house that evening feeling more confused than when I'd arrived. Over the next few weeks, I tried to let it go. I told myself that family dynamics are complicated, that maybe Natalie really was just dealing with venue limitations, that I was being oversensitive. Maybe this was one of those situations where the mature thing to do was accept the decision gracefully and move on. But the more I thought about it, the more it bothered me. Not just the exclusion itself, but the way everyone had responded to my confusion. Like I was being unreasonable for expecting to be included. Like there was some obvious explanation that I was too dense to understand. I started paying more attention to family interactions. The way conversations would stop when I entered a room. The way Natalie would mention wedding details to Tyler on family phone calls but never brought them up with me. The way Mom and Dad seemed to be walking on eggshells around me. Overly careful and artificially cheerful. Something was wrong. Something had been wrong for a while, and I'd been too close to it to see it clearly. That's when I decided to book my own venue. It wasn't meant to be spiteful, at least not entirely. It was meant to be practical. If I wasn't invited to my sister's wedding, maybe it was time to throw my own party. I'd been thinking about hosting a big birthday celebration anyway. My 35th was coming up in a few months, and this seemed like the perfect opportunity to gather all the friends and extended family who apparently weren't making Natalie's exclusive guest list either. I started researching venues in the area, small places. Since I wasn't planning anything elaborate, just somewhere nice enough for a decent party, big enough for the 50 or 60 people I was thinking of inviting. That's how I found Rosewood Manor. It was perfect. A historic venue about 20 minutes outside Millbrook Heights, set on beautifully landscaped grounds with a charming main house that could accommodate up to 100 guests. The photos on their website showed elegant rooms with hardwood floors, crystal chandeliers, and tall windows that looked out onto gardens that were probably stunning in the spring. I called to inquire about availability and rates. The woman who answered was friendly and professional, walking me through their different packages and available dates. Everything sounded perfect until I mentioned that I was interested in the first weekend in June. "Oh," she said, and her tone shifted slightly. June 1st or 2nd, yes. Is there a problem with that weekend?" "Well, we do have another event that weekend, but let me check on the details." I heard clicking, presumably her checking their booking system. "Can I ask your name?" "Cassandra Vale." A longer pause. "Vale, yes. VLE, that's right." The clicking stopped. "Oh my, can you hold on just one moment, please?" She put me on hold before I could answer. I sat in my car outside the grocery store, listening to classical music and wondering what could possibly require checking on. Either they had availability or they didn't. When she came back on the line, her voice was careful, professional, but with an underlying current of something that sounded almost like sympathy. "Ms. Vale, I think there might be some confusion here. We do have an event booked for June 1st. And according to our records, it's also for the Vale family." My stomach dropped. "I'm sorry, what?" "The wedding of Natalie Vale and David Hartwell. Booked for June 1st, expecting approximately 150 guests." I sat in my car, phone pressed to my ear, trying to process what she'd just said. 150 guests. Not 75, not the tiny, intimate gathering Natalie had described. 150 people. "Ms. Vale, are you still there?" "Yes, I managed. I'm here." "I'm assuming you're calling about adding to the existing booking?" "We do have some flexibility with the final head count, though we'd need to finalize numbers at least 2 weeks before the event." "No," I said quietly. "I'm not calling about the existing booking." Another pause. "Oh, then may I ask what your relationship is to the other booking?" "Natalie is my sister." Silence. "Your sister?" "Yes. And you're not involved in the wedding planning?" "Apparently not." I could practically hear her trying to figure out how to navigate this conversational minefield. "I see. Well, obviously we can't double book the venue, but if you're looking for a different date, we do have some availability later in the summer. Can you tell me when this booking was made?" "I'm sorry, the booking for my sister's wedding." "When was it made?" "I really shouldn't share details about other clients' bookings, please. This is important." She hesitated. "It was made in November. November 15th, to be exact. November 15th, 3 weeks before the engagement party. 3 weeks before they'd even announced the engagement to the family. And the guest count was always 150. The initial booking was for 125, with a note that they might expand to 150 depending on final RSVPs. Never 75, never the tiny, intimate gathering that supposedly couldn't accommodate immediate family. "Ms. Vale, are you all right?" I realized I'd been sitting in silence for probably 30 seconds, trying to absorb what I'd just learned. "I'm fine," I lied. "Thank you for your help. If you'd like to look at other dates, I'll call you back." I hung up and sat in the parking lot, hands shaking slightly, trying to understand what I'd just discovered. Natalie had lied to me. Not just a little white lie or a gentle omission. A calculated, deliberate deception designed to exclude me from her wedding while making it seem like an unavoidable consequence of practical limitations. But why? What could I possibly have done to warrant being deliberately excluded from one of the most important days in my sister's life, and why go to such elaborate lengths to disguise the exclusion as a venue limitation rather than just telling me the truth? I started the car and drove home, my mind racing through every interaction I'd had with Natalie over the past few months, looking for clues I'd missed. But nothing jumped out at me. No fights. No tensions, no obvious sources of conflict. Unless this wasn't about something I'd done recently, unless this was about something deeper, older, more fundamental. I spent the rest of the afternoon sitting in my living room, staring out the window at my neighbor's perfectly manicured lawn, trying to make sense of what felt like a puzzle with half the pieces missing. That evening, my phone rang. It was Tyler. "Hey," he said, "I've been thinking about our conversation the other day, about the wedding. Oh, something's been bothering me about it." So I called Natalie. My heart rate picked up, and I asked her point blank why you weren't invited. Told her it didn't make sense and she needed to explain it better. What did she say? She got weird, Cass, really weird. Started talking about how you'd understand if you knew the full situation, and how some family dynamics are complicated, and how she was just trying to keep things peaceful. Peaceful, that's what she said. I asked her what that meant, and she said there were things about the family that I didn't understand, and that she was trying to protect everyone by keeping the wedding small. Protect everyone from what? That's what I asked. And she said I should talk to Mom and Dad if I really wanted to understand. I closed my eyes. Did you? I called them right after I hung up with Natalie. Asked them what the hell was going on. And Tyler was quiet for a moment. They said I should ask you. I felt like I was in one of those dreams where you're trying to run but your legs won't move properly. They said I would know what this is about, yeah. They said you'd know exactly what they meant, and that if you wanted to tell me, that was your choice, but they weren't going to be the ones to explain it. Tyler, I have absolutely no idea what any of this is about. Are you sure? Because they seem pretty convinced that you did. I'm sure. I'm completely lost here. This is really fucked up. Cass. Yeah, it is. We talked for a few more minutes, both of us trying to piece together a puzzle that seemed to have no logical solution. By the time we hung up, I was more confused than ever, but also more determined to get to the bottom of whatever was happening. The next morning, I called Rosewood Manor back. Hi. This is Cassandra Vale. I spoke with someone yesterday about venue availability. Oh yes, Ms. Vale. This is Jennifer, the event coordinator you spoke with. Have you thought about alternative dates? Actually, I was hoping you could help me with something else. About my sister's wedding booking. I really can't share client information. I understand, but I'm wondering if you could tell me who made the booking. Was it my sister, or was it someone else in the family? A pause. Well, I suppose that's not confidential information. The booking was made by Eleanor Vale, the mother of the bride, I assume my mother. My mother had booked the venue, and was anyone else involved in the planning, any other family members? Let me check the notes. It looks like Eleanor has been our primary contact throughout the planning process. She's made all the arrangements, approved all the details. Very organized, very specific about what she wanted. Has my sister been involved at all? Oh yes, she's been to several appointments. Lovely girl. Though mostly it's been Eleanor handling the logistics. I thanked Jennifer and hung up. Adding this new piece to the puzzle. My mother had booked the venue. My mother was handling the logistics. My mother, who had looked me straight in the eye and told me that Natalie's venue was too small to include everyone she wanted to invite. The venue that my mother had personally selected and booked, knowing full well that it could accommodate 150 guests. That's when I realized that this wasn't just about Natalie's wedding. This was bigger than that. This was about something that involved my entire family, something they all knew about except me. And I was going to find out what it was. But first, I was going to book that venue for the same weekend. Because if my family wanted to play games, I could play games too. I called Rosewood Manor back one more time. Jennifer, this is Cassandra Vale again. I've been thinking about what you said. About not being able to double book the venue, right? We definitely can't do that. What if I told you that I'm planning to have my own celebration that same weekend, not competing with the wedding, just adjacent to it? I'm not sure I understand. What if I booked the venue for June 2nd, the day after the wedding? Well, that would be possible, assuming we can get everything cleaned and reset between events. It would be tight, but doable. Perfect. I'd like to book June 2nd for a family celebration, about 60 guests, as I gave Jennifer my credit card information to secure the booking. I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks, a sense of agency, of taking control of a situation that had been spiraling beyond my understanding. I had no idea what I was going to discover about my family's secrets, but I was going to discover something. And I was going to do it from a position of strength rather than confusion. Because whatever they were hiding from me, whatever they all knew that I didn't, I was done being the only person in the dark. The wedding was 3 months away. I had 3 months to figure out what was really going on, and then, whether they liked it or not, we were all going to have a conversation about the truth. Booking that venue was the first time in months I'd trusted my own instincts over my family's explanations. Something deep in my gut told me this wasn't about venue limitations or budget constraints. It was about something else entirely. Standing in my kitchen that evening, credit card receipt in hand, I felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. I'd just committed to hosting my own event the day after my sister's wedding. At the same venue where she'd excluded me, it was either brilliant or completely insane. But for the first time since that lunch conversation with Natalie, I felt like I had some control over the situation, instead of being the confused sister wondering why she didn't make the cut. I was taking action. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. Any updates on the wedding situation? I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, I'm handling it. Because I was. Whatever my family was hiding from me, whatever truth they all seemed to share while keeping me in the dark, I was going to find out. And I was going to do it on my own terms. The investigation was just beginning.